Good day, guys, and I'm back. Welcome to my channel. This is Glenn Pajares, and in today's episode, I will discuss the determinants of morality. So, what do you mean by determinant? Determinants are factors or elements that determine or identify or tell us whether an action, a decision, a choice, or a behavior is good or evil, or right and wrong. So the determinants help us identify, determine, decipher, tell whether an action is good or evil. So what are these elements that help us identify whether an action is good or evil? So I have four in my list. Traditionally, in most textbooks, there are only three. But in this video, I'll be giving four, and I'll explain why. So first is the intention. Second, the act itself. The third is the circumstance or the circumstances. And the fourth is the consequence, the effect or the result of an action. In most textbooks, there are only three, namely intention, the act itself, and the circumstance or the circumstances. But I'm adding the effect or the consequence of the act, because there is a theory in morality, which is consequentialism, that determines the goodness or evilness of an act, a decision, or a choice based on the result, the impact, the effect of the action or the decision. So let's start with the first element or the first determinant of morality, which is intention. So everything starts with an intention. There is no such thing as a human act or a moral act without knowledge, consciousness, consent, awareness on the part of the agent in doing an action. An intention is the rational, the purpose, the goal, the objective, or the end of an action. So it is that for which an action is done. So there's no such thing as a moral act without intention. And everything starts with intention. So a good act has a good intention, and an evil act has an evil intention. But intentions are not enough. But there's a theory in morality which says intentions are enough to make an action good and evil. And that theory of morality or framework is called moral intentionalism. But in this video, I'm telling all of you that the intention alone is not enough to make an action good or evil. We have to consider the other three elements. So the second element is the act itself, the nature of the act. So there are three types of acts in terms of its nature. We have the good act or the good human act, the evil human act, and the indifferent human act. So we'll start with the good act. So a good act is something good, but a good act may become evil. In fact, it can easily become evil by virtue of a change of intention, circumstance, and the effect. So a good act, for example, sharing is a good act, being generous, being kind, being giving. But the act of giving, which is good, can easily become evil if the intention of giving becomes evil. Also, the circumstances. When we say circumstances, we're referring to things, person, place, time, condition, situation, events that may affect the goodness or the evilness of an action. So we say being generous, being kind, sharing, giving may become evil by virtue of the circumstance. For example, let us say thing. So what is being given? The thing given. So if the thing given is a toxic or poisonous drug that may kill a person, then the act of giving becomes evil. Or what is given is a weapon of mass destruction intended to destroy the lives of people, then the act of giving becomes evil by virtue of the circumstance. And of course, the effect. So no matter how good the act is, but if the act of giving harms people or destroys people, just based on the recent example, then the good act becomes evil. But there are actions that are evil in themselves, and according to rule or the rule, evil actions by themselves cannot become good even if the intention is good or the circumstances are good, and the effects are good. So, for example, murder will always be evil, no matter what. Stealing, theft, exploitation, abuse of others will always be evil in themselves, despite the intention, the circumstance, and the effect. So take note, actions that are evil in themselves cannot become good by virtue of intention, circumstance, and effect. So they will always be evil. Next is an indifferent act. What is an indifferent act? An indifferent act is a human act or an action that is neither or neither good or evil. That's why they're called indifferent, but may become good or evil depending on the intention, the circumstance, and the effect. So, for example, of an indifferent act, let us say standing or sitting down. By themselves, they are not good or evil, but they may become evil or can become evil by virtue of the intention, circumstance, and effect. So, for example, standing. So, standing, if you say the circumstance is you're in a classroom and there's a rule which says, thou shalt not stand if not acknowledged or if not necessary because it will disturb the class. So, if you stand and if you violate certain rules of order, peace, and organization or harmony, then that violates. The act of standing becomes wrong or evil. And sitting also, in a circumstance or situation where sitting may not be required. So if you sit down, then you violate a precept or a rule or a guideline, then that makes the act of sitting wrong or evil. So an indifferent act is an act that is neither or neither good nor evil, but can become good or evil depending on the intention, circumstance, or effect or consequence. And we have the circumstances. The circumstances are indeed very important as a determinant because an act that is good or indifferent can easily become good or evil depending on the circumstance. For example, the act of kissing. So kissing, I think, is indifferent, but may become good depending on the intention, the circumstance, and the effect. So when does kissing become evil? So for example, if you kiss your neighbor's wife and where on the lips, then that becomes evil. But if you kiss your grandma on the forehead with the intention of respecting her or expressing love, then that is good. So see how circumstance, the person, the thing, the time, the place, the geography, the situation, the event can make a good act either become evil or an indifferent act become good or evil. And finally, which is the effect. As I've said, this is something new because in most textbooks, they are not mentioned or not declared. But in this video, as I've said, effects or the consequence is very important to determine or make the act either good or evil. So it's not just the intention, it's not just the act itself, it's not just the circumstance, but as moral agents, we really have to have foresight to think in advance or look forward whether or not our decisions, our choices, our actions will yield good results or evil results or beneficial consequences or non-beneficial consequences. So those actions that yield beneficial consequence or favorable consequences or good consequences, then they're good. And the contraries are evil. So those are the determinants of morality, namely intention, the act itself, the circumstance, and the consequence of the action. So before we judge or declare an action good or evil, it is necessary that we carefully, meticulously analyze the four elements because one element affects the goodness or evilness of an action. So all of them must be considered before one declares something as good or evil. So that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching and listening. Please click like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Till the next episode.